You already know. That line of the beat. A mí me gusta la mota, saca la bolsa. We're breaking up the bud and we smoking on some bomb ass weed. We smoking on some bomb ass weed.
Cheers, salute. Y'all already know what it is. Favorite Puerto Rican GQ to Ember. And you are now in tune with 420 The Buzz alongside my co-host
Joey, coming to you live from well south of the Mason-Dixie. Your one-time Yankee down here in the FLA. And then over to the Archbishop.
That would be me, Jimmy, the Archbishop Shannon, coming to you from dead center in the middle of this great country we have, coming in, bringing some info, and, man, really looking to blow it up from this point.
Nice. So everybody that's tuned in, just want to let you guys know this is episode numero uno at here 420 The Buzz, you know what I'm saying? And we're going to give you some insight, of course, on the whole cannabis movement, everything cannabis, everything that you need to know, everything you didn't know, and everything that, you know, we hope that you are appreciative to have learned. You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, we might as well jump into a bit of the history of this unfortunate prohibition that we are still somewhat living, but you know they are loosening the belts little by little. Let's get into some of this history, shall we? Who wants to jump into this first? You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna represent the hood. So I'll interject when
right.
need be.
Joey, man, you want to do paper, rock, scissors, or you want to flip a coin? Like, what we rolling with it?
Go right ahead, Jimmy. You go all the way back to the Asiatics.
All right. Well, then I tell you what, you know, being episode numero uno, I think that we need to talk about uno, dos, and tres, which are the three things that brought us here together, right? The trio, the three things, the three dudes. We're bringing it like this. First of all, why are we even here? Second of all, we're going to jump into when did marijuana even get to the United States and how long has this been a thing? And three, when did it become public enemy number one? And everything that we're going to have to do from a legislative perspective and an educational perspective, even just as important as the legislative, because I think it's pretty safe to say that a lot of the lawmakers that are currently sitting in Congress and the Senate know about as much about this plant as everybody else out there. After all, they were selected to represent us. And so where should we start? So let's start in the 1600s to the 1890s. So the United States came around. We started to build a population, and the United States government actually were giving away land to people that were immigrating from other parts of the world, as long as they agreed to give a percentage of the land to growing nothing but hemp for the federal government. And why is that? So first of all, we talk about hemp and we talk about marijuana. And I think that it's very important to know that hemp and marijuana are both cannabis plants. Right? So let's start there, because people seem to think that hemp and marijuana are two completely different plants. Cannabis is often referred to as marijuana, vice versa. But honestly, when you say cannabis, the real question should be, are you talking about hemp or marijuana? Because at this moment in time, marijuana was not prevalent in the United States, at least not known to the people that were coming into the United States, people that were already here. To the natives, different story. And I'm going to let Joey speak on that topic later on in the show. But 1600s to 1890s, the government agreed to cut off a piece of land for people that were coming over, immigrating, and wanted to build the population of the new world that we know of today as the United States of America. In 1619, the Virginia Assembly passed legislation requiring every farmer to grow hemp during this time frame. Hemp was allowed to be exchanged as legal tender, by the way, in Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Maryland, right? Because before there were the 50 United States, remember, there were 13 colonies, right? So during 1619, there were colonies. Domestic production flourished until after the Civil War, when imports and other domestic materials began to replace hemp for many purposes. And in the late 19th century, marijuana became a popular ingredient in many medicinal products and was sold openly in public pharmacies. Right? And that was right about the time that the Pure Food and Drug Act passed in 1906. This was required labeling of any cannabis-contained product which was over-the-counter that was used as medicinals. Then, from 1900 to 1920, we had the Mexican Revolution right in the middle there in 1910, and Mexican immigrants flooded into the United States, introducing to the American culture recreational use of marijuana. And the drug actually became associated with immigrants, right? So the fear and prejudice about Spanish-speaking newcomers became associated directly with marijuana. So for those of you out there of Latino culture, wondering why it is that, movies that were made over the decades and where that all came from, that was the root, right? It was 1910 after the Mexican Revolution, right? So the borders opened, people were bringing that dirty cabbage, right, over across the border, and the association began, right? Knowing that hemp and marijuana at that time were two very different things, right? They were not both known as the cannabis plant. And we'll get to how that was classified here in a little while. So anyway, the anti-drug campaigners were out there. They warned against the encroaching marijuana menace and terrible crimes that were attributed to marijuana and the Mexicans who used it, which we laugh about today. Wasn't funny back then, because all of this is the core root of where this came from. Then let's jump ahead, a couple decades to 1930s. So then you have now the fear of marijuana, right? So the fear of marijuana during the Great Depression, massive unemployment increased and public resentment for the fear of Mexican immigrants, escalating public and governmental concern about the problem of marijuana, which ingested a flurry of research that we linked to the use of marijuana with violence, crime, and other socially deviant behaviors, primarily committed by racially inferior, right, people or underclass communities. So by 1931, 29 states had begun to outlaw marijuana. Now, I just want to add a little bit of context to that, because if we jump back just a little tiny bit to 1916 through 1918, Pierre DuPont and William Randall Hearst were both two very big political donors. And one was, William Randall was into the paper industry. He owned 13 newspaper publications, and Pierre DuPont had a petroleum company. Well, with the growing of hemp, starting back in the 1600s, right, where remember, the U.S. government made it mandatory for farmers to grow a certain percentage of their land for hemp for the government because of the versatility of this plant. Right? So through the plant, you could make biodegradable plastics, you could make paper, you could make biodiesel, you made all sorts of textiles, you made clothing, and basically would do it for a fraction of the water used in having to deforest the earth for the trees for the same products, particularly paper. And then, of course, from the plastics perspective, the biodiesel, you had Pierre DuPont, who was a petroleum guy, saw the hemp farming as being threatening to his business, and being a capitalist country, obviously the dollar reigns king. And so they, around 1929, approached the director of narcotics for the FBI, and who was obviously in fear of losing his job. The government was making huge cutbacks on jobs. Like I mentioned, unemployment was skyrocketing. We were getting ready to go through the Great Depression. We were losing the war on Prohibition, which arguably could or could not have had ever truly existed. But again, anything around intoxication at that moment in time was heavily scrutinized, and approached with the idea that if we were to focus on marijuana being, racially deviant and used by the underclass, and a quick Google search of any type of like Reefer Madness 1936 type propaganda will reveal the types of posters that were definitely racially centric that were available at that time for people to see. So by criminalizing marijuana being a cannabis plant, that in turn would then criminalize the growth of hemp in our country. So for them, it wasn't about the immigrants who were bringing marijuana over from Mexico. It wasn't about the, racially underclass of people that were using it and the intoxicating factor of marijuana. They saw this as the opportunity to make big political donations to start a campaign against marijuana, which then would make it illegal to grow hemp, which then would make it so that their businesses could further flourish. And there's a lot of other information that we'll cover in future episodes that we're going to be talking about, that will go into the AMA and the Rockefellers and Rockefeller's dad and his snake oil cure for cancer that he was peddling and how that came about. But at this moment in time, let's just kind of stay focused on this history. So in 1932, the Uniform State Narcotic Act was enacted. This was concerning the rising use of marijuana, again, using political dollars by big political donors who saw hemp as a threat to their business and their income. And research linked its use with crime and other social problems, created pressure on the federal government to take action. And rather than promoting federal legislation, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics strongly encouraged state governments to accept the responsibility for the control of the problem by adopting the Uniform State Narcotic Act. And that was in 1932. Then we jump ahead to 1936, enter reefer madness.
Right.
With all of the plentiful information that was available through all of the massive scientific studies that were available with all of the, whatever that they had back then. But anyway, so we'll just call it, Hollywood and the government of the United States putting together for mass broadcast a film that was touted as a film of education of what marijuana was really about. And if you were to do a quick Google search on that and then look at today, it is a comedy. So, you're right. You're right, Cube, man. Then in 1937, this is where the Marijuana Tax Act came about. And it was a national propaganda campaign against the evil weed. Congress passed the Marijuana Tax Act, and the statute effectively criminalized marijuana, restricting possession of the drug to individuals that paid an excise tax for certain authorized medical and industrial purposes. So what's funny, that's not really funny, but is kind of funny, is that the government says, okay, you can possess, sell, trade, and manufacture and use marijuana if you have a tax stamp. And in order to prove that you have the marijuana to get the tax stamp, you need to bring at least 1 ounce, right? So think about how many laws are in place or are now quickly dissolving as they should that revolve around 1 ounce, right? So being a Colorado native, it was a misdemeanor until you had an ounce or above. And I know a lot of states were like that as well. But anyway, so then you have these guys going down to the post office. They got their weed. They're like, all right, man, I've got my stuff. I'm going to prove it. It's just over an ounce. And I'm going to go get my tax stamp. So they go into the post office, they put the cabbage on the counter, and they get arrested for possession. Yep. So imagine now how far we have come with the use of technology, cameras, reporting, and accountability to where something like that absolutely would just be very difficult, if not impossible, for any government agency to be able to enact. But nonetheless, come grab your tax stamp. Just bring your stuff so we know that you have it, so we can give you the tax stamp. You show up to prove that you have it, and because you have it, you get arrested for possession. So fast forward to 1944. LaGuardia report finds marijuana is less dangerous. 1944, right? New York. Yep. Academy of Medicine issued an extensively researched report declaring that, contrary to the earlier research and popular belief, the use of marijuana did not induce violence, insanity, or sex crimes, or lead to the addiction of other harder drugs like the gateway drug, right?
They had my man Harry. They had my man Harry.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying, dude? And so 1944, right? So when is the first time in your life that you heard that marijuana was a gateway drug? And now just know that you didn't know before that in 1944, the LaGuardia report out of New York conclusively proved that everything that your grandparents, your parents, and you, and maybe some of y'all's children heard that marijuana is a gateway drug. I did an interview with a newspaper, and we were talking about gateway drugs. And so I had pointed out that Tylenol should be the first gateway drug that we were introduced to. Because when you think as a child, you have a fever, you don't really know a lot about a lot because you don't have anything for life experience, but you know that you had a fever, you know you didn't feel good. Your mom, your grandma, your aunt, father, somebody in the household went over to the counter, went in the cupboard, grabbed the bottle of Tylenol and said, take this. And then an hour later, you started feeling better because it started to control your fever. It took away a little bit of the aches and pains that are associated with the fever. But wouldn't that be considered a gateway drug, since that's actually a drug that was listed by the FDA, a drug that you were given that made you feel better, right? So how does that, at a very young age, that's exactly right, man. So at a very young age, you were taught that by taking something, you're going to feel better. And then at some point in your life, someone introduced you to cannabis that solved a whole lot of problems. We're going to talk about why that is later on. And I promise you that, contrary to popular belief, THC is a very small part in the overall of why it is made you feel better. But okay, so there's that. So staying inside of the 1940s, the government then understand that you have the Tax Act, we're going to war, now we're in World War II. You can't grow hemp in the United States anymore, but you can import it. Right, you can import it, and we were importing it primarily from India and the Philippines, East India, Southeast India, if you really want to break it down. Well, guess what? Japan went ahead and severed those routes, so we weren't getting the hemp that we needed to make cords for parachutes, clothes for the soldiers. You know, there was a lot of products that the government was making using that hemp that we've been using for 400 years. Well, 347 years before that. And so we were importing it, but when the import stopped, the government all of a sudden came back and started hemp for victory, like victory in the war. And so during World War II, the imports of hemp and other materials, as I mentioned, that are crucial for producing all sorts of marine cordage, parachutes, other military necessities, became very scarce at a time where we were at war both in Europe and Asia. And so the response by the United States Department of Agriculture launched its Hemp for Victory program, which encouraged farmers to, again, plant hemp by giving out seeds and granting draft deferments, right? You don't have to go to war, but you gotta grow cannabis, man. You know what I'm saying? So, hold on. And anyway, so the government gave out seeds and grants the draft deference. I think that's hilarious, to those who would stay home and grow cannabis. By 1943, the American farmers registered in a program. They harvested 375,000 acres of hemp, right? Wow. How long was that? That was like 1 year. That's 1 year. Crazy. We went from zero to hero in 1 year. But then we won the war, and the government was kind of laxed a little bit on the hemp laws. So then in 1951 through 1956, now not only are they starting to go back to making it illicit to grow cannabis of any kind, but including hemp, right? Which is high in CBD, by the way. That's going to come into play in future podcasts as well. But also made it fairly inexpensive for companies to be able to manufacture products that are being used for the good of American society. But then 1951 through 56, here came the enactment of federal laws, which was the BOZ Act of 1952 and then the Narcotics Control Act of 1956, which set mandatory sentences for drug-related offenses, but made sure to include marijuana. A first-time marijuana possession carried a minimum sentence. Are you with me, guys? Of 2 to 10 years with a fine of up to $20,000. Now, given the cost and rising of inflation, $20,000, right, in 1956, my guess at a 3.5% increase in to do the differential inflation, I would think would be closer to about $200,000. Fine. In today's money, right? I mean, I have to go back and do like the math, but the quick math in my head puts it at about that. Then we jump up to 1960. So by the 1960s, right, marijuana is kind of everywhere. That and LSD, right? Yeah. But there was a changing political and structural cultural climate that was reflected in more lenient attitudes towards marijuana. So the use of the drug became more widespread in the white upper middle class, Reports commissioned by Presidents Kennedy and Johnson found that marijuana did not induce violence or lead to heavier drugs. Again, in 1960, just repeating the information that they had in 1944, right? The policy towards marijuana began to involve considerations of treatment as well as reconsidering the criminal penalties. Not that that had to do anything with the upper white class being the ones mostly caught with it. Well, maybe.
Right.
Then, I mean, I'm not saying, I'm just saying, right? So in 1968, you know, here came the creation of the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs. It was a merger of what was then known as the FBN, which was the Bureau of Dangerous Drugs, and the Food and Drug Administration. Came together, made Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs. In 1970, the repeal of most mandatory minimum sentences, right? Just after that happened for marijuana is when Congress repealed most of the mandatory penalties. In other words, the 2 to 10 years and the $20,000 related offenses. It was widely acknowledged that the mandatory minimum sentence of the 1950s did absolutely nothing to eliminate the drug culture that had embraced marijuana through the 1960s, and that the minimum sentence imposed were just unduly and just harsh. So after that, marijuana was then reclassified and it was differentiated from other drugs. And there was a comprehensive Drug Abuse and Prevention and Control Act, categorized marijuana separately from other narcotics and eliminated the mandatory minimum sentences for possession of small amounts completely. And that was the year that NORML, if you have not heard of NORML, that is the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. And each state has their own chapter. You should probably check into it and see who the local advocates are in your state. A couple years later, the Schaefer Commission, which was a bipartisan commission appointed by Nixon, at the direction of Congress, considered laws regarding marijuana and determined that the personal use of marijuana should be decriminalized, right? This was in the 1970s,
Right.
1972. Nixon rejected the reconsideration altogether, but over the course of the 1970s, 11 states did in fact decriminalize marijuana. Most others reduced their penalties. I'm quite sure that was a year before I was around. And I'm sure that my home state of Colorado was probably one of them, because living in Colorado, growing up there, marijuana was never considered like a harsh, horrible drug that you're going to go to prison for any length of time. And in a lot of cases, it was a $25 fine without a court appearance, depending on whether or not the police officer even wrote you up for it. But anyway, 73.
I know in New. I mean, I don't know about 73, but I know in the 90s and shit, New York, them brothers it was one of two things that was gonna happen. Either you was gonna get a DAT, desk appearance ticket, or you were definitely gonna get locked up for at least 24 to 28 hours, depending on if you got locked up on a Friday. You might have to wait the weekend. You know what I'm saying? But that's how it was in New York.
Yeah, and that was in the 90s too, man. That's when. That was when Joe Biden instituted the stop and frisk and the harsher penalties, and that's when you had. I
went through a lot of that.
I bet you did, man. I bet you did. And you can thank Joe Biden for that, actually, man. He was a hard proponent of that. He wanted people to get years and years in jail for crack, which we're not talking about crack. I'm just saying, man, like, when we talk about communities that are being persecuted, like look at where that persecution came from. But we don't have to talk about that today. Today, let's talk about High Times being founded in 1974. That's right. High Times magazine popped off in 1974. So now we're definitely starting to see movement in the positive direction. 1976 begins the Parents Movement Against Marijuana, which was a nationwide movement that emerged of conservative parents groups that were lobbying for stricter regulations of marijuana and the prevention of drug use by teenagers. Some of the groups became very powerful, and with the support of the DEA and the National Institute on Drug Abuse, which was the NIDA, it was instrumental in affecting public attitudes, which led to the 1980 war on drugs. So that popped off around 1986 when the Anti-Drug Abuse Act, which that's when the mandatory sentences began, because President Reagan signed the Anti-Drug Abuse Act, and that instituted the mandatory sentences yet again for drug-related crimes. And in conjunction, by the way, with the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984, the new law raised federal penalties for marijuana possession for dealing and basing it on the drug involved. The possession of 100 marijuana plants received the same penalty as possession of 100 grams of heroin.
Crazy.
Anyway, a later amendment to that Anti-Drug Abuse Act was established, and the 3 strikes and you're out policy, if you guys remember that.
Thanks,
Bill.
Thanks, Clinton.
That's when that came around. That was the policy requiring life sentences for repeat drug offenders, and providing the death penalty for drug kingpins. All right, so let's just unpack that for 1 second. So the death penalty for drug kingpins, I can see how somebody who lost somebody in their life because of heroin or extremely harsh drugs, like even if you go into like the cocaines of the world, I think heroin was probably one of the worst, PCP, things like that. But the fact that marijuana was even grouped into that category, like you have 100 plants, you're going down like as if you had 100 grams of heroin. 100 marijuana plants. It is, dude. And then in 1989, of course, you had Bush's war on drugs, which we can now see was an absolute failure. But that's when
went from bad to worse to you got to be kidding me.
Right, we're not even in the 90s yet, man. You know what I'm saying? Like we're still in the 80s, and we've seen though, right? So we've seen 40 years. 1944 report released. Marijuana is not. It doesn't lead to drugs. It doesn't cause, racial wars and people to be stoked. So it goes from that in 40 years to all out war. You're going to go to prison for the same amount of time for having 100 plants as you do having 100 grams of heroin, right? But then keep in mind, what is the core of this, right? What is the core? Starts back with hemp, right? Goes into marijuana, which was being used medicinally back in the day. For obvious, properties. We didn't even know back then what we know about it today. And we will, again, I have to emphasize, get into this in later episodes, with the trio, 420theBuzz. We're here to give you this type of information. And we're going to go into what we know about medicinal cannabis, versus what we knew back then. But even back then, they knew about it. So in 1996 actually was a critical year because that is when medical use of cannabis was legalized in California. And California voters passed what was then Proposition 215, which allowed for the sale and medical use of marijuana for patients with HIV, cancer, and other serious painful diseases. The law stands even today with great tension with federal laws that prohibit the possession of marijuana. Now we're talking about rescheduling, but California just kind of set it all off. And, after that, there's, we could go into 1999, the federal government who said there was no medicinal use for cannabis applies for a patent for CBD oil, which was granted to them in 2001. But in 2005, when it was legalized in Colorado, the federal government was still saying that there was nothing medicinal about cannabis, while yet simultaneously holding a patent for CBD oil. And if you want to look it up, like I'm not going to go into it because that's its own podcast.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But go look it up, man. Just type in federal government patent awarded CBD. Just type in something, federal government CBD patent. You'll find it on Google, man. And when you read
sorry, not to interject, but they were also, there was also, I forgot what his name was, but there was somebody that was actually receiving like a canister of pre-rolls for medicinal usage from the government. I remember seeing a documentary behind that, and I was like, "What, are you serious right now?" And he literally was getting a full canister. He would get it every single month, a certain amount of joints every single month, and this was during those exact times.
And let's fast forward to 2020 and 2021, right? Still a Schedule 1, still federally illegal, but yet the government used federal funds, particularly on the West Coast, in dispensaries that encouraged people to do, I believe they called it joints for jabs. So to get a COVID vaccine, the government funded, the federal government sent federal funds to the West Coast states, which reimbursed the dispensaries to give joints to people that went out to go get the COVID vaccination. So again, different podcast, different time, different subject. But the point is if it's illegal on a federal level, then wouldn't that make the government, the U.S. government, wouldn't that make them culpable for conspiracy to commit a felony? Couldn't that, because on a federal level, right, now they're using tax dollars, federal funds, to hand out something that is illegal on a federal level. So they are not, if the government doesn't really care, I mean, obviously that shows that they don't really care. But anyway, again, you know, we can, that is another topic, another day, but not today. So the reason why we're here, right? So why are we here? We are here today because the whole topic of cannabis is like one gigantic, horrible game of telephone. People have been on the receiving end of information, starting with your grandparents, maybe your great-grandparents, depending on where you're at in the generation spectrum, which was then handed down to your grandparents, which was then handed down to your parents, which was then handed down to you, and it had the propaganda information like Reefer Madness, and it's had information that's been obliterated by the U.S. government, like the 1944 Act that we had mentioned earlier that stated that after a comprehensive study out of LaGuardia, New York, there was no significant damage that was done by marijuana. There was no gateway drug going on. Like, where did that go? We're in the 1960s when CBD was founded. Actually, I think the CBD, I got to look this up to fact check myself. I think the CBD was actually first discovered in 1940s, but Israel, of all places, began to do comprehensive studies on cannabis in the 1960s. As a matter of fact, in 1993, when the endocannabinoid system, which again, this is something we're going to talk about in later episodes, was widely adopted and accepted here in the United States in 1993. Those studies were largely done by the Israelis, right? So where did this information disappear from? Well, the information that people have today is information that's been handed around. Maybe you've gotten information that someone told you just sounded really good. Maybe it was a friend of yours that you trust, but it's the wrong information. It's the wrong information, and we are here today to be able to start an educational forum that is going to talk about real cannabis education, that is going to talk about what's really happening at a legislative level, what's really happening with the new researches that are coming out, and what's really happening and what exactly is medicinal about cannabis, right? What is CBN? What is CBG? What is THC? Really, what is CBD? What is it really? What is CBC? We're going to talk about all of these things. This ultra critical information that we here at 420theBuzz, the trio, are going to dispel a lot of I hate the word misinformation. We're going to dispel a lot of misinformation. The big game of telephone that's been happening for about 104 years now, right? Yeah. We're going to go into the facts, and then, you know, that's it, man. I mean, why are we here?
For all the people that are tuned in, I'm gonna let you know right now. Like, I represent the hood. You know what I'm saying? When I met these brothers, they started telling me THC, ABC, DEFG, and all that other stuff. I was just like, bro, I don't know what that all is. Where I'm from, you know what I'm saying? You just want to get it, light it. You know what I'm saying? Get it, roll it, light it up, and it got to mess you up, and you got to feel real good. You know what I'm saying? Behind it, I did not know there was 132 components behind this stuff, and I'm not saying that literally, but there is a lot, and it could be that and then some. These brothers here, like what we're gonna do here at 420 the Buzz, I'm not just gonna be the only one giving you information. I'm learning too. So for everybody from the hood that's tuned in watching, trust me when I tell you, you are going to learn that you don't have to consume this beautiful plant one way. You understand what I'm saying? You may realize that the way you've been consuming it your whole life is probably not the way you should be consuming the rest of your life. You know what I'm saying? And just be prepared, because this show right here is going to inform all walks of life. There's people that are not from the hood that don't know. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter. You have to be black, you don't be white, you gotta be Hispanic, you don't be none of that stuff. The point is, be prepared to be entertained and to be informed. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what we doing here at 420 The Buzz, bro. I mean, this show is going to blow your minds. There's going to be stuff that you don't consume, and you'll see how we utilize this beautiful plant. You know what I'm saying? And what Jimmy was touching in with what the Archbishop was talking about, we have missed already opportunities where we didn't have to be in this mess, probably with global warming, a lot of political issues, you know what I'm saying, a lot of social issues that we've been dealing with that could have already have been resolved by not even being a problem at all had we stuck. Yeah, they were on the right path. Hey, you get land, you gonna grow these plants for us. If we would have stood on that path, imagine where we would be today. You know what I'm saying? So, man, continue. I digress.
So, I mean, that really concludes everything I had to say. I mean, I can't emphasize enough that the cannabis information out there, again, a giant bad game of telephone. You know what you know because someone you trusted told you that, heard it from someone who said some stuff that just sounded really good. And now you know what you know because you do because, okay. But now, moving forward, tuning into this show, you're going to know the truth. And it's undisputed, and we can back it up with receipts on every single thing that we say. We will happily post all of the links where we gather our information, and a lot of those links are gonna stretch back and actually go to like National Institute of Health.gov to clinical studies that have been performed with results. Where you can go and fact check us. You know, if you have questions, I encourage you to comment down below. I encourage you to get your voice in there. You got a question? Well, yeah, Archbishop, we heard this, but, you know, and this is our experience, so, you know, why? You know, there's a reason why. And I will be more than happy to donate any time, knowledge, in anything that I've learned in this industry for almost 20 years now. And just to give you some background, I jumped into the medical marijuana industry on November the 3rd of 2005 when my friend Angela called me. I was out of town doing some consulting. I was actually in West Virginia. It was 9 o'clock West Virginia time, 7 o'clock Colorado time. She calls me and freaks out for two reasons. Number one, she was like, you know what I'm doing? I was like, what are you doing? She's like, guess what I'm doing? I'm like, dude, I'm at work. You know what I'm saying? Just break it down. Normally, if someone asks me, hey, guess what? I'll be like, how many guesses do I get? And I'll say some ridiculous stuff, you know, to just ridiculous, not even possible answer. And she's like, I'm circling the Denver Police Department with a sack of weed on my dashboard. And I was just like, oh my God, you're like teasing the piranha. You know what I'm saying? Like, what are you doing, dude? She's like, dude, Colorado passed medical marijuana. And you know what? That was on the 3rd of November, 2005, a day that changed my life forever. Because at first, I was like, oh, well, the state of Colorado is finally, like, giving it up, dude, and just letting us, you know, without penalty, just be able to have weed, smoke weed, and hang out and do whatever. But no, what I learned after that, with the cannabis scientific community and medical marijuana doctors and people that have been studying cannabinoids, oh my God, dude. Like, what I learned was so profound. I learned about CBN when it was still like $70,000 a kilo. You know what I'm saying? That was so hard to come across it. Now, you know, the price is reduced, you know, tremendously. I know a lot of products that I manufacture, that we manufacture, you know, that we can speak to you, you know, are cannabinoids that have been isolated away from other cannabinoids because of the way they affect the body. But then I move on to Oklahoma in 2010 because the company I worked for was like, go out there and see what's up. So I did. And then they just kind of repositioned me here because of statistics. And then in 2013, opened up my own vape store because I was just done being, you know, having my corporate lobotomy, dude. Like, I had to wear a suit and tie every single day, and I just wanted to wear shorts and a t-shirt and Jordans to work every day and just interact with people and not have to travel all over the place, especially internationally. I missed my daughter's first steps. I was excited about opening the business, and then I almost died. I had a fever of 107 degrees for 26 days. It ruined my sympathetic nervous system, and that led me to being told that the only reason or the only thing they could do for me was prescribe me Xanax and other benzodiazepines. And I was like, that is not the only thing that we can do. And they were like, yeah, it is, because Oklahoma, much like what you were saying, Freddie, back in New York, Very strict, dude. I thought I moved to a different planet. I went from, if you have underannounced, you're probably not even going to show up in court, to if you get caught with a joint, like you're going to jail, mandatory, you're probably going to get a prison sentence if it's your first offense. And God forbid if you happen to be exercising your Second Amendment at that time, because then you just racked on a whole bunch of other felonies on top of that. And it was miserable. But I called my homeboy up in Colorado and told him I need some CBD isolate, man. Why? Because the way it adheres to the CB2 receptors, which happen to be loaded in your adrenal glands, which helps to stop the production of epinephrine and norepinephrine, which can prevent you from having panic attacks, which is what I was suffering from because the fever destroyed my sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. And so at that point in time, I started manufacturing it. It got to the point to where I was on law enforcement's radar for CBD with no THC because it was isolated. And somebody said to me, if you don't like the law, change it. And so I said, okay. So I dropped my hat up at the election board and ran for District 46 State House of Representatives and began to work on House Bill 2913, which allowed us to grow hemp in Oklahoma under a federal pilot program, which then allowed me to have much larger conversations with lawmakers, with the general public who were afraid that if they talked about marijuana, that they would go to prison. And so it allowed us to have those conversations. Then in 2017, State Question 788 passes, which we wrote as the people because the House and the Senate didn't want to take it up. Now we have medical marijuana. And my whole point this whole entire time wasn't just legalize marijuana so that people can just get marijuana. My whole point is that without legal marijuana, you can't study the other cannabinoids that are inherent and plentiful inside of a marijuana plant, like CBN. Right? 5 milligrams of CBN is like a 10 milligram Valium. So think about everything Valium is good for, right? Vertigo, insomnia, anxiety, and muscle spasms, right? If you have a bad back, you're probably going to get some Valium, right? Well, guess what? We would never know the power of CBN if we didn't have medical marijuana because of the THC. And so now it's 2024. We're 7-8 years away from where we were when that happened. And the information that we have, the studying we had to do in order to write legislation, in order to pass laws, in order to free a state from being persecuted for a plant, while simultaneously fighting the FDA, pharmacists, and a lot of doctors, to be honest with you, it was no longer anecdotal evidence. We were no longer accepting information from other states that were doing clinical studies. We were now able to do our own. This is how it's going to roll out with every single state. And you will find out through listening in that not only is smoking it, one of many different ways to be able to use it, but the THC. Yeah, well, of course, as it should be. You know what I'm saying? It's the easiest way. The THCA has to be decarboxylated. How do you decarboxylate? You expose to heat and time, right? How do you do that? You put it in paper and apply a flame, right? Then all of a sudden, the A on the THCA drops off. You're changing the molecular structure. It becomes Delta-9, and what was once not so psychoactive will get you high. So high. Oh, so high.
That part right there. Right there.
You know what I'm saying? But other than just going out and getting squinted, you know what I'm saying? Like, there is actually medicinal properties to this plant, man. It is really, really being studied and used for a lot of different things. THCV, right? One of my favorite cannabinoids. Doesn't necessarily get you high, but it works kind of like Adderall. And it gets you really focused and it gives you that energy and you're just like, what just happened, man? And then it works on the A1 receptors by inhibiting the production of the hunger hormone, which helps to control your appetite. It is amazing for weight loss, which is why they call it diet weed. You know what I'm saying? And this cannabinoid, it exists in very small quantity, but nonetheless, in the exact same plant that they don't want you to have because it's going to get you high, right? And cause all sorts of violence and gateway drugs, which was dispelled in 1944. So we can talk about this all day long. Oh, but we only have an hour, unfortunately. But fortunately, because I know you guys are probably like, this dude needs to shut up. And so I'm going to kick back for a minute, man. I'm going to let you guys talk, bro. Before I get laryngitis, I can talk about this for the next 16 hours.
Well, let me quote it back into Joey. So I met Joey, and he blew my mind, you know what I'm saying, for lack of a better term, when he was telling me that there was technologies out there that could show us how we are supposed to consume this plant. And I was like, at first I was like, wow, that's amazing. He's like, yo, you may not it may be in your DNA not to have to be able to smoke it. I ain't gonna lie, I rebuke that. I like to roll it up and I like to enjoy mine. But the point is, that's where I started to open my mind with the other ways that you can utilize this beautiful plant. So I want to let Joey kind of jump into his history so that the people understand who is this guy with the Yankee hat sitting in this car, and what is the knowledge that he has, because he has a plethora of knowledge on this. Go ahead, brother, take it away.
I just want to remind everybody the angle that I come from and that most people are starting to look into is that weed, as we would call it, all right, is a medicine. And we have to start looking at it like medicine, all right? Growing up, when people would call it reg, there is no reg, okay? There is no reg. And I just want everybody to just start the paradigm shift that, and we're going to continue to say they, all right? Call it the American Medical Association, call it the FDA, call it any of those three letters, that they didn't want you to know about. Okay, because any and all pharmaceuticals, white pills that we call them, all right, meds, they come from originally some formulation, active ingredient occurring in nature, all right? So there are communities, and I'm going to rep, once again, the Americas, because that's where I'm from, here, United States, the States, whatever you want to call it. There are many cultures, many communities that come from this continent, that come from our people, that used medicine, right, from the ground. Before there was Robitussin, before there was Benadryl, before there was Claritin, before there was some type of Vicks, right? Vicks, Vivaporu. Before that, there was La Hierba, all right? So where I come from, where my family comes from, my grandmother was a curandera. That means that she was a doctor. She was a neighborhood doctor. She was a healer. She gave birth to everyone's children, or birthed them. And any ailment that anyone had, they would go to my grandmother. Guess what her main ingredients for healing people was? Hierba.
Marijuana. La hierba.
Hierba. Yep, la hierba. La hierba buena. All right. Cáñamo. And once again, we're going back. They didn't call it marijuana. That word came from somewhere else. Trust me, people. It did not come from people. It didn't come from the people. All right.
Right.
So the term marijuana, which is nowadays, the nomenclature of it is, it makes reference to hierba that is grown for THC. Okay,
it was also it was popularized behind Harry Anslinger when he was on his campaign, I believe.
Absolutely. But once again, we're going to make a paradigm shift together, and we're going to start thinking about this as definitions, as words, because they matter. All right, and we're going to have to somehow take down some words and look back, peel back some onion layers. It may make you cry. And find out where these things came from and redefine them, because it's up to us to do that, and we can. It's the day and the age of us together and the internet. Anyway, so my grandmother would use hierba for just about anything to heal people. All right. There was nothing that hierba could not do. And if it couldn't do it, usually, there were some ailments. You had gas, you had a pain, you had some form of anxiety before the term, before the definition came out. You were worried, you were stressed. There was something about it that was easily fixed. Okay. Think about it. Stress leads to a lot of things. And so if you could fix stress, you could fix a lot of things. So that was her job. That's what she did, on the block. So that being said, I want to make sure that we, as an audience, as fans, as people together, we start to look at hierba as medicine, which it is. It's medicinal. It's therapeutic. All right. It's nutritional. And that being said, there are some and we'll get extremely granular going forward, all right, and starting to talk about the different categories, the different variations of hierba. But there are some strains that you should stay away from, and we're going to get there. There's some strains that you have no business passing to your friend, or no business taking the pass.
I feel like those are the
Just
ones
take
that I
the
love the
pass.
most.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the whole tribal thing, there's nothing like it, right? There really
Yeah,
isn't.
yeah.
It's luxury. It is the way that it's camaraderie. It's the locker room. It's luxury. That's how it speaks volumes, really, in some communities. Anyway, there are reasons to stay away from a lot of strains. There are reasons to stay away from strains because there are certain cannabinoids that you should stay away from. And once again, that's a granular path that we're going to go down. We're going to deep dive on that. But right now, I just want to set the stage, let you know, I'm Joey. I come from people where this was our medicine way before Viva Peru was around, way before any kind of white pills to treat anxiety or what, all these acronyms and abbreviations that we've come up with. And it should be respected that way because it's important. It's important because youth today, even people's in their 20s and 30s, you could fall into a hole. All right. You could fall into a hole, and the holes are real. You don't want to do that. All right. And you don't even want to learn it yourself. Learn it from here. There's a way to learn from somebody else hitting a brick wall. You don't have to do it yourself. And that's what we're going to be. Those are the kind of subjects we're going to be approaching because it is medicine. We've got to look at it as medicine. We've got to take it back, because it was taken and now it's all recreational. Guys, it is medicine. Okay? Don't let them say this is medical marijuana, this is recreational. No. It's cáñamo, it's hierba, it's medicine. It's all the same. So, so that's where I'm going to be coming from, Jimmy. That's where I'm going to be, you know me, Freddie. But I'll hand it back over. I'll hand the baton over. But that's my side. I believe in ancestral medicine. I believe in ancestral foods. I believe in intermittent fasting. It's not what you put in your body; it's what you don't put in your body. A lot of times, so I believe in health in my own hands, which is why I'm going to talk about going forward. I'm going to talk about certain strains that are from Africa. I'm going to talk about certain strains that originated based on the environmentals of the Americas. I'm going to talk about things that relate to food in the same way, where you find that you get sick. Well, if you get sick from food, which is also medicine, from certain foods, from certain wheats, right? People are gluten-free, this and that, because you're not supposed to be eating it, right? You're not supposed to be eating it because that's not your ancestral food. Right. Same thing with your ancestral medicine. You got to look at it. It's important. We're going to look at it that way. So, hand a baton back over.
You know, it'd be real cool if you know how they got like a food pyramid, which is completely jacked up. You know what I'm saying? That would be cool if we had a weed food, like a weed pyramid. Yeah, we should have like a weed pyramid, right? That'd be awesome. But
I'm going to share with you my weed pyramid, actually.
Yeah. So real quick, just to get a little bit of context of my history, and then I want to jump into that pyramid.
Yeah, take the baton, take the torch.
So my whole upbringing was, I grew up in Jersey, Hightstown to be specific, and I was the youngest child of three, but I didn't really get to grow up with my brother and my sister. They from my dad's previous relationship, and so I grew up kind of like a loner type of person. I had friends, but I kind of like stood by myself, and I stayed in my room a lot. Hip hop was my life, and but that wasn't what influenced me with marijuana. My first real influence behind that, not like I was pressured to use it because I never did with this person, was my uncle. My uncle was like, he's from the Bronx. You know what I'm saying? He was getting money in the streets. He was doing this thing. Yeah, he was one of those, and he would always be burning. I remember one time he asked me, like, yo, I was in high school at the time. She was like, yo, you smoke? And I was like, nah, I don't know. Because I was like, yo, my mom, your sister, my mom will kill me. My dad will, I don't even know what that, bro, I'm coming from a time where I really thought a nickel bag was like 5 cents. I was like, I don't know what a nickel bag is. Like, what the heck is that? You know what I'm saying? But once I got exposed by watching him, not to say he was a bad influence, because that was one thing, he wasn't trying to push nothing on me. It's just me observing, right? Started to learn things, and of course with the music, and then I started realizing that most of my friends were doing it. Then I was like, really, for real? Like, you serious, bro? That's crazy. But I still didn't mess with it. I didn't touch weed until after I graduated high school. Now, mind you, my senior year in high school, I was selling it. You know what I'm saying? To my friends only people that I knew. But once I graduated high school, I remember that summer in particular, we were going to the Bronx, and I used to take the bus into the city, and then from the city, take the train into the Bronx and the whole 9 yards with my cousin. And we used to bring a friend from Jersey of mine, and he used to be one of my biggest customers. He was a cool cat. So one day, he wants to smoke so bad. Remember, I think it was one of the first times I went there. He was like, "Yo, I'm dying to smoke," and we were waiting for the A train, bro. We're on the platform. My cousin's like, "Bro, don't do that shit." He's like, "Come on, man." And we were all alone in the subway. It was super late at night. He was like, "All right, fine, whatever." So he rolls a quick, blunt. He starts smoking it, and out of nowhere, I was like, "Yo, you know what? Let me take some." I'm like, I'm out of high school. Like, I'm thinking to myself, I'm not gonna get into any trouble because I'm not in high school, so that's not gonna be a factor. Well, I had been dealing with depression for years. I went to a couple of hospitals. That same uncle was murdered. That affected my life. My father died just after graduating high school. That also, played a part in a lot of things that were going on with me. So I was just like, you know what, F it. Let me take a hit. Well, when I took that hit and I started to feel it after the second one, because the first blunt didn't do nothing. So we smoked another one, and I was like, why? And it was, mind you, I was selling the crap. I was like, am I selling this crap? It's crap. What am I selling? You know what I'm saying? He's like, nah, man, trust me, you're probably just not doing it. I mean, I didn't even have the whole, the inhale and like take the smoke in my mouth, inhale. I was trying to get that together. And but once I got it and I felt that feeling, I was like, wow. So, I'm going to like 2 or 3 different mental hospitals at that time, committed. You know what I'm saying? I was on Prozac, lithium, Wellbutrin, you know what I'm saying? As a teenager going on into that time. And I'm like, wow, all this crap that they've been giving me to make me feel this way doesn't even feel as good as how I feel right now doing this. So why don't I just stop doing that and let me just focus on doing this? But I just didn't want it to be like a major hit to my pocket. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what they say, never get high on your own supply, right? Yeah. And I didn't want it to become an issue. You know what I'm saying? And that was my introduction to marijuana. You know what I'm saying? And I just enjoyed it for years. Now, my life, I had a lot of stress. Like you said, stress is something that if you can reduce it, because you can't eliminate it, but if you can strongly reduce it, you'll see that your health will automatically be better. You know what I'm saying? It's like when you are stressing a bill and all of a sudden now you have the money to pay it, right? You automatically feel this thing inside of you that's like, a sigh of relief. Well, when it came to cannabis for myself, that's what it has always done for me. It's just giving me that inner sigh of relief. You know what I'm saying? Now, of course, at that time, no, there's no dispensaries at the time, right? You get arrested for this stuff, especially in New York City, anywhere really. But East Coast, New York City, they're throwing you in jail. So it was like, you got to find the good bodega that's selling it on the low, get it, this and the third. So who knows what I was smoking, right? Who knows what I was smoking for years? Because they just getting whatever they can for cheap and trying to make their profit. You know what I'm saying? So, and then of course there were times you smoke shit and you're, damn, why is my throat burning? Or my head is hurting. Like, I'm not going to that spot anymore. You start associating those spots with crappy, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Shout out to the whole 183rd of the Bronx. They were notorious for that. But I'm saying, like, it just for me, it just developed because I'm from that era of, we all are from what they call regs, where it was seeds in it and stems, just regular weed regs, right? And to what blossomed now, because before, bro, like to get like a high grade, they called it loud, and it was like extremely expensive. And you're like, what the heck is this? Like, you only getting this much for this much? Hell no, I'll stay with my regs all day. But it just formulated into this type of industry where now it was like, man, it's a cleaner, for the most part, it was a cleaner hit. It was better. There's still some crappy growers out there, even with, you know, with the feminized, you know, buds and stuff like that. But the point is, it just got into a pocket where I was like, man, this is great. But then for myself, it came into a scrutinized pocket because, you know, I have right now, currently, I have a CDL. So because I have a CDL, it's a federal license.
Yep.
So, you know, for years, you know, I was, you know, doing what I had to do to pass the drug test. Right. No problem. But it is getting so much more tougher now, where now DOT, like these companies have to be registered under something with DOT where they have to actually, it's like a program where you say, yes, I drug test my drivers. Because if you don't, then I believe it's either frowned upon, or maybe now it's becoming a part of, like, it's a necessity. You have to have that type of you know, regulation. So now it's where, you know, you could get randoms at any time. And I worked for a company that in the beginning I was getting a random every month to every other month.
Wow.
Yeah, I was retarded, and I'm over here like doing what I gotta do.
It was just like that. It was random. They would just
like that. I'd get a text. Yep, I'd get a text from my boss like, "Hey, before you come in, when you come in, pick up this form. I need you to go take a drug test." And I was like, "Okay." And I'm frantically doing what I got to do to, you know, to pass this thing. I get by, right? Now, mind you, yeah. So mind you, like teas, and all that other shit that does not work for me. All that crap does not work for me for whatever reason. So I would have to, you know, resort to other means. So those means are not easy, and they're not for the faint of heart. I can promise you that. You will be nervous as heck and all that good stuff. So anyway, I'm doing that. I'm like, okay, I'm good. I passed. Everything's great. All right. 2 months later, hey, I need you to take another drug test. They got to the point where after the third time, I was like, bro, like, do you, like, at my job, I was smoking, but outside of the truck, like once I'm home, you know, I would be out for a week, come home for 2 days, and I'd smoke and, you know, be loving life. I'm like, bro, is everything all right? Like, do you suspect something? Like, what's wrong? And he goes, dude, it's not me. It's just DOT. They'll send us an email saying this driver has to go. And he's like, last month they sent this so-and-so driver. And I'm like, damn, for real? Like, yeah. So anyway, eventually it, you know, because you got to be 100% every time with whatever you're doing to pass the test. You just got to mess up once. And I messed up. You know what I'm saying? And once I messed up, that was it. License was suspended. I had to go through a whole shit show, you know what I'm saying, to get my license reinstated. You know what I'm saying? It cost me money, cost me time. Oh yeah, it's a whole ordeal. Now, granted, going through all of that, luckily, the job even though they went belly up anyway after a few years, but at that time, they had told me, listen, you get yourself reinstated, we will hire you back, no problem. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, you have to maintain, you know, whatever your level of sobriety, right? So I was like, okay, cool, no problem. So I did all that, came back, everything was successful. I never had an issue after that ever again. The next year, they have it's called Clearinghouse is the organization. So that was formed in conjunction. And if anyone that's watching that knows it better than what I'm explaining it, you know, leave a comment. But for the main, you know, just the gist of it is they're in conjunction with DOT. So what it is, and it's literally just a database for people that, you know, are alcohol and drug offenders, you know what I'm saying, on drug tests. And the year after I got myself cleared and everything, that came into play, where any driver that tests positive during the drug test, they become part of that database. And anytime they go for a job that's a driving position, that job has the right to go into there, look them up, and if they're in there, decide that they don't want to hire them behind them. Yeah, wow. Even if from then on they, you know, whether they found God, they stop using, they don't even want to talk about it, they can't even watch Half Baked, all that stuff. Doesn't matter. You're in there now. And I dodged a bullet on that part, so I always made sure, like, I didn't want to, you know what I'm saying? But I say all that to say this. It's been quite some time now for me being free. And although, you know, you can live your life productively, we don't have to be smoking or ingesting edibles or anything. You don't have to be a part of this culture to make it. myself. I'll speak for myself. Because I'm not using it for back pains or this. I'm doing it really for mood pains, if that's even a thing. You know what I'm saying? As an uplifter.
You just gave it. You just made it.
You know, you're right. So it's been great for my mood stabilization. But at the same time, now that I don't have that in my life, you know, obviously I got to grab the bull by the horn now and deal with life. And you're going to always deal with life. It's just like, there's been times for me where I'm just like, man, this sucks so bad. Like, you know what I'm saying? I don't have withdrawals. I'm not, you know, whatever. But it's just a moment where you're like, man, the restraint on somebody was like, bro, I'm not driving an 18-wheeler high. Just because it's in your system doesn't mean it's affecting, you know, whether I want to brake the truck, you know, like brake or continue to plow into somebody. That has nothing to do with it. It's if you're intoxicated at the time that, yeah, you know, that's not a good look. You know what I'm saying? Sure. So right now, and because even though they're you know, rescheduling it, it's not going to benefit any of the drivers, even if they have a medical card, because that you're taking a chance right there. Your medical card will not protect you as a CDL driver for any DOT drug testing. It just will not. Now, it's funny. They will ask you if you do have it. But for me, it's just more like a collecting data type of thing. Well, he has it, but you're not protected. It's a federal license. It's still illegal on a federal level. You are not getting by at all. And that reclassify,
Freddie, let me ask you on that point. I mean, as far as you know, are medical doctors that are in the club, in the American Medical Association, are they held to the same random tests? Do they go into a database if they're caught smoking? Because, I mean, and I think everybody knows, most doctors that I know of, they smoke, they participate. So as far as you know, are they held to the same
as far as I know, as if a doctor's license is not a federal license, then they're not held to any of that. Okay. It's on a state level.
They're not. It's not a federal license.
No, actually, it'll just be held on whatever the office that they practice in, if that's their guidelines. You see what I'm saying? But I know professionals too. I know lawyers. You know what I'm saying? I know some politicians. I know some other people that they can do whatever they want. They don't have to worry about that. You know what I'm saying? Basically, in life, you just got to position yourself. And unfortunately, for that moment, I was like, yeah, I'm good. I can get by on these tests. I could care less. You know what I'm saying? But like I said, it's just been getting so much more stricter, and it's going to continue to get stricter. Now, from what I've been hearing in the trucking industry, they are considering going to mouth swab. Right? Now, that could... And what they're doing is they're trying to find a way to kind of like, hey, we're still enforcing, but we're trying to find a more lenient way of maybe detecting. So really, it's like, for me, it's like a wink, wink. If you can, you know, Listerine strips or whatever the heck it is that you do that can get you to not get a positive testing, fine, that's fine. Because they're saying that the urinalysis is a little bit too invasive, you know what I'm saying? If that's you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that really, if you do that legitimately without trying to pop a Listerine strip or whatever, because that's what I used to hear, just pop a Listerine strip, this, that, and the third. I'm like, bro, I bet that shit don't even work for me. But the point is, if you do it legitimately, where it's, let's say, you know, you're over the road, you know, for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because you can be on the road for about a month. You know, there's drivers out there for a month and better. And if they're only doing it like every so often, and there's like maybe 3 or 4 days gap that they don't, you know what I'm saying? Hopefully when they get hit with a random, it's within that 3 or 4 day gap, and then you swab and then you'll be fine. But it's super, bro, you're rolling the dice, bro. You're rolling. And let me tell you, at truck stops, they sell alcohol. So I can get in my truck, get a whole 6-pack, keep it in there. And then after work, I can get nice and tipsy and all that stuff, and I'm not, you know, knocking anyone that does that. And then the next day, wake up, oh, all right, I'm not drunk, start the truck and keep going, and then take a drug test that day or the day after, and I'm good to go. Wow. And it's the same, and it's really the same thing that if you know, and I have done this before, where I'm over the road, bro, I got my jar stashed, this and the third, after 11, because you drive 11 hours. but your work day can be 14 hours. You have work day hours are 14, and you have 11-hour driving, but your day with the stops and everything, it can go to be 16, 17-hour days. You know what I'm saying? Because every time you stop, and then of course you got to factor in your 30-minute break. You know, you're like, damn, I've been running for like 16 hours. You know what I'm saying? And you know, yeah, exactly. So with that being said, you know, after that, you know, I'll be like, all right, let me just smoke a little bit because I'm like wired up now. Smoke a little bit, go to sleep, chill, whatever. Wake up the next morning, the same as if I would have drank a few beers, and I get up and I'm not high anymore, and I drive and I'm good to go. It's the same thing that we can do if we regulate this stuff the correct way. You know, and I'm not just saying regulate weed. I'm talking about regulate the regulation. You know what I'm saying? If we could regulate the regulation, it doesn't have to be we're like, oh, you see, it was in your system. That's the reason why. Like, bro, it doesn't matter. Like, I got vitamin C in my system. Does that affect me too? Like, come on, bro. As if I'm at the time I'm intoxicated. No doubt. And because I'm a CDL driver, there's certain medications that you can't take either. You know, you can't, you know, if you have like depression as a CDL driver and you start taking pills for that stuff, that can disqualify you as well.
I'm sure.
So now you're like, okay, I'm suffering from depression. I need this.
So, right?
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
It's all relative, but
yeah, absolutely.
Let me ask you a question though, Freddie. Like, do you think that, you just made reference to, you know, regulating yourself, right? Do you think that if there was better information out there, if there were more information for people specifically to analyze themselves and what their needs are, and what they should engage in and what they should stay away from, that sort of to self-regulate, if there was more self-regulating out there, do you think that somehow that would get to the industry and things would change? Or do you think there would still be objectively across the board, this is what it is and this is what it's not going to be?
Yeah, but it's like if we're trying to be almost like optimist, pessimist, I'd be like, there's optimist, pessimist, and realist, right? So optimistically, yes. Pessimistically, and unfortunately, in this case, realistically is going to also, you know, kind of join in the hands. They're not going to do it because it just takes it's just already in a place where it's viewed a certain way. You know what I mean? Like so it's already has that negative, that stigmata, that negative connotation where it's like, no, it's going to take for that generation to die, off. Yeah. And the generation that think like, you know, all of us to say, hey, no, there is a better common sense way to regulate this. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, it's like, look, are you high? At the moment, no, I'm not. I don't feel any effects from a beer. I don't have any effects to, you know, a medication, this, that, and third. Cool, then you're good to go. You can operate it. So if you have an accident, God forbid, we shouldn't blame it. But here's the thing. They're going to say, well, how do we know? What tests? Oh, I got it. Let's see if it's in your system. Because if it's in your system, it must have played a factor. And then it just becomes a one size fits all to, aha, I knew it. I knew it about you, right? It's like today, if someone has rear end somebody, right? You're like, damn, how the heck did that guy rear end that person? Like, what was he thinking? I bet he was on the phone, right? Isn't that the automatic thing? Bet you he was texting, right? So here we are. This is the way we think. We're humans. He could have been like, bro, I wasn't texting. I literally sneezed or I literally dropped something, looked down for a split second. But we're like, yeah, okay, whatever. We're not going to believe him. So that's the same mentality, you know, when it comes to these, you know, officials, because they're looking down, right? They look down on you 9 to 5. From 5 to 9, they're doing the same shit you're probably doing. You know what I'm saying? Correct. But they're off the clock. Yeah. So it's just what needs to just happen is, you know, we have to say, listen, there have to be field tests to know if you're at high or drunk at that moment, right? They have sobriety tests for alcohol, and I know that they have it for weed too. So if that's in place, why are we still going to what's in the bloodstream. You know what I'm saying? Because it's not like alcohol. If you, I mean, at least I don't think so. Like if it's, I mean, maybe, I'm sure there's levels in your blood of THC that could probably say, yeah, you definitely was high. But
there is,
you know, okay, so cool. So then that's what we need to go by if we need to do that. You know what I'm saying? So, but it's going to take time, bro. And all this, it's like snail mail when it comes to, you know, you know what I'm saying? Moving the ball forward, bro. Like, you know, you're getting a half a yard every possession when it comes to, and sometimes you're losing 20 yards in this movement. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, like, you know, that's where we're at with that today in my opinion.
Good looking out. So, you know, it's interesting to hear your perspective. So we all automatically know who you're looking out for, and that's important, right? Because what you were saying, if you're coming from the angle and you're like, look, my thing is, I'm from the hood, and that's the perspective, that's the objective that I'm taking. That's important, right? That's very important, because I mean, as far as I'm concerned, my side is, look, it's for communities, tribes, people, nationalities. It's all the same, man. It's all the same to me. I think that, once again, it's a paradigm shift that we all have to get over. I think that there's something beautiful about the tribal puff pass. I think there's few things left in our society that are as strong as a quote unquote, tribal event, if you will.
Yeah.
And so if it's that important, and if it's still a luxury within certain communities, which I think it's a luxury within as a cross section of communities, it's important enough to find out, to listen, to put your ear to the street and find out what's important for me may not be as important for others. But you know, we should listen to each other. We should listen to each other.
And to piggyback that, like, you know, this cannabis movement, at least from my perspective, it's not us versus you, as far as, you know, someone that's into cannabis and others that like alcohol. It's cool. Yo, like what you like. The thing is this: if you're a real patriot, right? Let's just use that word. If you're a real patriot, I'm talking about for those that are like, whatever the status quo is today, that's what a lot of them, or, you know, people like that will really gravitate to. Patriotism, right? You're protecting freedom, right? Well, choice is freedom.
Without a doubt.
Saying?
Without a doubt.
Right. You don't want anyone to infringe on your choices.
It's the first, it's the second, it's the third, it's the fourth. It is,
you know,
that's the freedom. It's the freedom of choice. Correct.
So we have to understand that the history of this unfortunate prohibition is also something that needs to continuously be regurgitated, because for instance, like, you know, I'm a hip hop guy, right? So when hip hop made sense to me, that was the start of hip hop for me. But there's a history before that my forefathers, you know, have had to tell me and had to show me, hey, listen, just so you know, you have this artist, you had this DJ, you had this movement, you had this event. These are the things that shaped hip hop up to the point where it starts for you. And then you know what I'm saying?
Freddie, it's an industry. Hip hop is a genre within an industry. Nonetheless, it's propaganda. And
right.
Whereas most art is propaganda, right?
Yeah.
So don't be foolish. Only the dumb are, confused by the drum. Don't be foolish. It is propaganda. Just like when someone says we're coming out of 4 years of this nonsense. And I talked to a friend, and he says, "Oh, it's peer reviewed." And I said, "Brother, you know what peer reviewed is? Peer reviewed is a sponsored doctor, a sponsored politician, and then a sponsored news outlet get together and they propagate something that's quote unquote peer reviewed. Now, all of a sudden, it has to be accepted by all. It's propaganda.
And as humans, we eat it all. We eat it all.
Someone paid for it, right?
That's right.
And so, as someone that also, self-professes to be a media ecologist like myself, a media anthropologist, I always, like I call it pulling back onion layers. Some other people call it following the money. You follow the money, you pull back an onion layer, you're going to find something that stinks at its original, at its origination. Something
and burns your
at
eyes.
the origin. And so, you know, that's another thing. We are a free country. We are a free people. Collectively, we are the freest in the world. And this information keeps us free, because the day and age of mainstream media, it's a wrap, right? That's up. It's over.
Yeah. Right.
It's over.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to touch on something that you said too.
How it's staying breathing is beyond me and unbeknownst to most, because it's up. The only reason it is still relevant is because they own the airways. They own, right, cable TV. And 1997, they allowed for pharmaceutical drugs and alcohol, spirits, to be advertised, marketed again on television.
Right.
Go back to 97 forward. Look what's happened to us, people.
Yeah.
Like, look at what Big Pharma has done. And look at how Big Pharma has exploded since then.
You're right.
Look at the years.
Oh, sure.
You just follow the money. So
I want to touch on something you said too, Joey, real quick. And I don't mean to cut you off, dude, but I'm going to lose this thought. So peer-reviewed, man. When we talk about peer-reviewed, what we mean is exactly what you said. And in addition to that, peer-reviewed means that people that are in your circle that share the same ideology or thought process agree with what you said. And they happen to have some type of credential which makes them give us the illusion of their credentials. And so, you know, peer-reviewed just means that other people in the same profession that agree with you have looked at what you have thrown out there, whether it's video, audio, whether it's reading material, and have just agreed with what you said. All right. And so it could go against 97% of the reality of what exists. However, with the media component that you mentioned, it was worth putting it out there for people to be able to see, and then saying things like, this has been peer reviewed. Like, what does that even mean? Who's actually sat down and actually like looked up what is peer reviewed exactly? Peer reviewed is people in the same profession, industry, or thought process have reviewed what you wrote and they agree with you. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It just means that people with some type of credential give you the illusion that what you're reading is correct. And the media agrees with it, and the powers that be agree to it, and the legislators and the senators and the executive, and you know, they agree with it because that's the message that you're allowed to hear. Because what you hear and see on TV is what you're allowed to hear. It's gone through a QA process.
It's all media driven. These are all categories of mainstream media, but it's a dying paradigm. We all know it. We all are living it. And so we just have to keep putting information out there that is free. It is attainable. You know, and I think that people are going to create their own information off of what is true. And once again, the truth of this plant, the truth of this medicine is that it is not a one size fits all, right?
Right.
And it's up to you, like Freddie was referring to self-regulate. It's up to you, like Jimmy was talking about, to review it yourself, right? To have your own peers, because ultimately it's another echo chamber, but the chamber could be closer to the street than it is to John Hopkins. But it's up to us to share that and understand. Now, at the same time, you know, what are you medicating for, right? Let's be real about this. Let's be real about this. Are you just being recreational, or do you have an issue? And what is that? I mean, you know, you should not be walking around medicated all day. I don't think you should, but that's up to you. That's up to you to find out what your balance is. But you know, if you need to, if it's necessary to be medicated all day, there's some deeper dives that you got to be taking, brother. You got to figure some stuff out, right? Because
it could be.
There's lifestyle choices in there that also you need to make some decisions on. Because
I ain't gonna lie, I've definitely enjoyed being medicated all day, but there's levels on how medicated you're gonna be, right? Like there would be times where, hey, we're gonna go out today, whatever it is. We're gonna go to the park, the theme park, whatever, water park. We're gonna go visit some family. Cool, no doubt. You know what? All right, what time we gonna leave? I will leave in like an hour. Bet I got time to roll one up and just chill. Boom, boom, boom. Do what I do. I'm from the hood. You know what I'm saying? Roll one up. This, that, and the third. Get nice and clean so I don't stink like it and all that stuff. Head on out for the day, and I'm just vibing the whole day, chilling. Now, mind you, there's some. I've had friends who are like, oh no, I don't like doing that because, bro, I would feel like I just wanted to sleep all day, or I didn't like, certain things that they would describe how they felt, and I would say, the thing isn't that that's what it does to you. The thing is what you smoked did that to you. There's strains on that. You see what I'm saying? That's why me, and shout out to all my West Coast homies because they gonna hate me for this. I'm a sativa lover. I love sativa. So being medicated all day on a sativa, it allows me to just stay mellow, stay sharp. Though it's not like I'm over here trying to count money at the register and I'm like, I can do this. You know what I'm saying? I'm not that. You know what I'm saying? But obviously, if I'm fresh off smoking a super big, blunt or a joint, probably not the best thing for me to count money. You know what I'm saying? But if I'm just doing where I'm just mellowed out and I'm chilling, bro, it's just literally just to chill me out. Why? Well, and I'm not gonna lie, I come from the area where we can smoke and we can drive and we could be just fine. So if I'm driving, I'm chilling. Somebody cuts me off, the average person is going to go in, start following, cursing me wild, this, that, you know what I mean? Me, bro, the road rage is serious. Somebody cut me off, I'll be like, look at this guy, bro. Yo, be safe out there. I'm not worried about all that. You know what I'm saying? I'm just chilling. Let him go. It's no big deal. That doesn't mean I'm not going to ever defend myself. You know what I'm saying? But the point is, I'm not going to be aggressive. You see what I'm saying? And that's what it's always done for me. Now, if I smoke a strong indica or an indica dominant, hybrid that maybe is known to for drowsiness, I don't want to drive with that. That's one. And two, I'm not going to smoke that and be like, I'm going to have a good rest of my day. No, at that day, someone's going to be like, yo, man, this, that, and third. And I'm going to be like this, like, what? Yeah, my bad. You know what I mean? I'm going to be not at all blaming it on the fact that I worked 5 days. Like, no, it's not that, bro. It's because you're on the indica. But on the sativa, bro, I'm mellow. I'm chilling. Now, mind you, what you said still makes sense. Because if someone is not productive if they medicate all day, then dude, no, don't medicate all day. But I promise you, people that know me will tell you, yo, Q, I have known this man for years. He could be super high off his sativa or whatever I smoke. Bro, my eyes wouldn't be shot and I was alert, doing what had to be done. If I didn't tell you, you wouldn't even know. You're like, bro, you're high right now? I'm like, yeah. You know that? No. You're not like all the other people. Yeah, I'm functioning. All it depends on what I'm smoking. You see what I'm saying? So for me, it can work, but I also can definitely agree on your statement there too, bro. Because sometimes you just gotta like not be on it, and then when you get home, do your thing, or switch up the form. Like if you need to be out there working and you do marijuana because you're in pain, but you're enjoying the high benefit of it as well, then when you're out there, take something that's just gonna focus on the pain, so that way you're alert. And then when you're home, then you can enjoy the rest of it, you know what I'm saying? So
and on that note, reminder, it exists. That exists. Something that focuses on the head and not on the body, and vice versa. It exists, and you're going to find it. That's the good thing about yerba, is that it works with the body in a balance. Unlike any other medications that are out there, both natural and white pill. Yerba finds the balance because of our equilibrium, right?
Yeah, they say everything is not for everyone, but when it comes to cannabis, there is something for everyone. You know what I'm saying?
There is. Yes, there is.
Facts.
There's a balance.
Hey Jimmy, real quick, man.
There
So
is.
you don't lose that train of thought. What's that pyramid? I'm so interested in the pyramid, bro.
You know what, dude? I'm going to email it to you guys,
Okay.
and we're going to make it our next show.
Okay, excellent.
Because if we start going into it right now, man, then
No,
people
you're
that
right.
have other
Right.
things to do are going to be like, "Oh, I'll get back to it." Yeah, it's an entire show,
Gotcha.
and it really just breaks down to everything as simple as the seed, right? So a quarter cup of hemp seed provides almost every vitamin and mineral that your body needs to function on a daily basis, to the individual cannabinoids, to the individual terpenes. When you start talking about indicas and sativas, I think it's important to mention that whether you're talking about hemp or whether you're talking about marijuana, if you're talking about the THCA molecule, is consistent among all strains of cannabis. But what makes a sativa? What makes an indica? And that would be the terpenes. And terpenes are found in more than just cannabis. Terpenes are found in all plants and animals across the spectrum, right? Like pinene comes from cannabis, also comes from pine trees, right? So, you know, it really is fascinating, and it really goes into some really good detail in it. I think that it's kind of its own show because it's going to talk about how cannabinoids will address conditions very specific, right? So pain, we know THC is globally accepted as a good painkiller because it is. But do you have to smoke it and get high? No, not necessarily. If you want the benefits of cannabis, you can apply a topical. You know, you can apply one of our pain sticks. You can apply one of our salves. You could do one of our massage oils. Massage oils, you know, what kind of pain are you in? You know, is it a stabbing pain? Is it a burning pain? There's a reason why doctors ask you those questions when you report pain, right? So they'll ask you, is it a stabbing pain? Is it a burning pain? For example, I had a conversation with someone yesterday who said that they were having a burning sensation in their neck, right? So that is a nerve issue. Nerve pain feels like it's burning, is on fire, right? Where stabbing pain is caused by something different. So if it's a muscle pain, right? So anyone who applies something topically, you don't necessarily want to feel uplifted, what Delta 9 does for you, or Delta 8 or 10 or 11, then you want to use CBN, right? CBN is an excellent muscle relaxer. I think we touched on that at the beginning of the show. And the pyramid that I'm going to send you kind of goes into all of that. You know what I'm saying? It goes into all of that. It goes into what cannabinoids address certain conditions.
Jimmy,
and
on CBN, bro, I am such a proponent of it, and I know that, you know, it's again for another show, but I am such a proponent and advocate of CBN because what it does for me is, if you allow it to do, again, CBN for me, it recharges the battery. Now, one thing, here's my testament to the test is that if you are interrupted, no go, no bueno, because there's something about it that it does promote the natural production of melatonin from in the body, from the brain, and that melatonin, when it's interrupted, gives you a hangover the next day because it was interrupted. It was not allowed to finish the job. That's my testament. So CBN, you know,
Interrupted
again for
the
another
download.
show. That's it, brother.
And now the file is corrupted.
Freddie, I mean, it is in that context, in that sort of wired context, that's how it would be. And I think people would relate to that. So save that comment, hold that thought, bro, because that is really how it's like you're going and all of a sudden something interrupted, whether it's short circuited, it's like something happened and then nothing worked properly after that. And so you wasted your money, you wasted your time, and I wasted a full fucking day the next day because I'm not proper. I'm not good.
Right. Oh,
yeah,
it carries over. It carries over. Wow.
Well, it absolutely carries over. Remember, the pharmaceutical equivalent of CBN is Valium, right? So 5 milligrams of CBN is equivalent to a 10 milligram Valium. So what Joey's talking about specifically is taking it orally, specifically for the purpose of being able to get to a point to where you can go to sleep. That's why he referenced melatonin. the topical application of CBN, say in a massage oil for somebody who has muscle spasms, is going to react very differently. So that part's not going to interrupt. That's going to do its thing. It's being absorbed topically. It's going to hit the neurotransmitters, neuroreceptors, and again, receptors, another right? show. Yep, different receptors, and and definitely a different show, because man, I could talk for the next 2 hours about CBN and the metabolic pathway and how it works, and I'm starting to get excited now. So we just need to change the subject before I start tripping, because I'm about to start tripping. But the whole point is this: the pyramid, man. So the pyramid tells you, like, what is CBG, right? What is CBC? Like, what do these do for you? And I think that one of the things that we are seriously focused on here is the education of cannabis and really breaking down what these things do. You know, the difference between the sativa and the indica being the terpenes, the flavonoids, like what terpenes are in a specific strain of marijuana that actually is like the go function in society versus the I want to play Xbox and order Domino's, you know, indica.
Right.
That's just to put it plainly. And so, yeah, man, the pyramid's going to be on. The pyramid is going to be on.
I like it.
So rest assured, it's coming.
Yeah, you know, I didn't know about all this until you guys came into my life. You know what I'm saying? Where I'm from, it's THC, and that's really what's the percentage?
That's the
you know what I'm saying?
right?
Like,
and then,
you know
and then somewhere along the line, CBD, entered the nomenclature.
And CBD, from where I'm from, man, we don't want that junk. That ain't doing nothing for me. You know what I'm saying? Not knowing that it is doing something for you, just not doing that effect of what THC does.
Not knowing that that whatever weed you had was balanced between, had a level of CBD in it, right? I'm
gonna be real. I remember one time I mixed 2 strains together, right? I got 2 cans of some organic bud, Skittles, and I think it was Cookies OG, something like that, I believe. And that was our hybrid back in the day. You know what I'm saying? You take 2 strains of weed and roll them together. That's our hybrid right there. And the dominant was which one did you put more of? You know what I'm saying? Like
that was the dominant.
That was the dominant strain. So I remember I rolled. Yeah. I got 2 buds of this and 1 bud of that. So now that's the dominant strain, the 2 bud, right? So I smoked that, bro, and I ain't gonna lie. I was like, yo, that was a stay-at-home moment. We ain't doing nothing until this calms down. And my head high was on 100, but my body high was on 1,000. Like, I was like, what in the life is going on right now? Like, I was feeling stuff in my body that I never felt in my body. Like, I literally was like, had energy and no energy at the same time. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was just like, it was like I could just sit here, but I'm not gonna go to sleep. But all I could do is sit here. Oh my!
I bet you were deep in thought too, man. You were thinking of everything that was going on in life that was great, and everything that's going on that sucks all at the same time, man. You just don't know whether you want to smile or cry, dude. Like,
yeah, my body was so high that my body and my mind had one of those, talking about space and stars and all that conversation within itself. Like, I was literally just I was 3 people in one. I was.
You were like, self, yourself.
Yeah, your body,
self?
your brain, and then I was somehow in the middle of it, just like enjoying the conversation between them 2. Like, I was like, whoa, this is crazy.
That's hilarious, man. That's hilarious.
That was medicinal in its own self, because I was like, my body, I was like, damn, I don't feel any pain, because I'm a person, I feel pain in my body too. You know what I'm saying? I've been juicing too now. I'm gonna tell you that stuff helps you out. But the point is, like, I was like, man, I don't feel no pain in my body. My body kind of feels numb and tingly at the same time. And then my head is how I want it to be, because I enjoy the head high more than a body high. But dude, I'm not gonna lie, that was outstanding. That was outstanding. So that I'm looking forward to getting back to in my life at some point.
Yeah, that, dude. Well, hopefully what we're doing right now is gonna like perpetuate that path, man, and speed it up for you. And I just think also, just to mention, man, if you ever are in a situation where you have just consumed way too much, and you've consumed way too much, man, if you go straight to CBD, that'll help to bring you back down, right? So initially, like, they fight for the same receptors. If you were to take it at the same time, it's kind of whatever gets there first. If you take CBD before THC, you won't be quite as high. If you take too much THC and you're too high, the CBD will help bring it back down. And some people really need that, man. Some people have really bad anxiety.
Jimmy, I describe CBD in a tincture. I describe it as the equilibrium, the way to bring your body into balance almost instantaneously, bro. Wow. Almost instantaneously.
Yep, you're right. You're right, and it happens very, very quickly, man. Yep. The endocannabinoid system is real. The receptors that it impacts are real, and bringing about homeostasis or the balance is very real.
In my life, and the people in it, they used to tell me in the Bronx. But like, I'll be like, I'm mad high right now. Oh my goodness, my head is spinning. They'd be like, quick, drink some milk. That's what they would tell. That was what they drink milk.
Yeah, man. Lactic acid is the cure.
Yeah. I'd be killing. Luckily, I love milk, so I would be killing it.
Yeah.
Oh man, me too.
That's hilarious, man. So look, man, we've got
one
everyone from here on out. You know what I'm saying? We're gonna bring you more content, more history, more knowledge. To be aware of this beautiful culture that we call cannabis, cáñamo, hierba, marijuana, however you want to address it. You know what I'm saying? Just understand that this is here to stay and it's going to continue to grow. You know what I'm saying? You could reach us, the trio, you know what I'm saying? GQ, the Embassy, Joey Lopez, and of course the Archbishop, you know what I'm saying? At 420thebuzz at gmail.com. You can hit us on Instagram at 420thebuzz, and also make sure you subscribe to the channel right here on YouTube. /420theBuzz. That's 420THEBUZZ for those that I don't know what's going on in your life. The point is, and you can holler at your boy, your favorite Puerto Rican, on everything social at GQ the Embassy, GQDAEMBASSY. You know what I'm saying? I got music out there, so it's, you know what I'm saying, streamable. Don't have your kids around it because it's a little crazy. I get a little wild, but nonetheless, you know what I'm saying? It's all love. And also make sure you check the Rhyme Radio on YouTube, Instagram, you know what I'm saying, and just subscribe. Get your knowledge, you know what I'm saying? Get your knowledge up. And and shout out to my Boston Celtics. You put 18 up there. You already know what it is. Salute to everybody that was tuned in. We love y'all. Keep God in your life, and you already know what it is, y'all. You already know. Cheer. 420 the Buzz. Cheer.
A mí me gusta la mota, saca la bolsa. We're bringing up the bud and we smoking on some bomb ass weed. We smoking on some bomb ass weed.